Welcome everyone to Scarlet on Stone Church on Sunday. And thank you for being patient with us. We did have a couple of technical issues, but we got through them. The more you do this, the easier it gets. But nonetheless, it does happen. So I thank you for being patient with us today. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our Sunday church service family. And we pray that tonight you'll be blessed by what I'll be sharing from the book of James chapter 4. And as promised, I'll also be talking about what we kind of sharing with you our Israel trip part 2. And I'll be talking about kind of some things that we did in our second part. Again, I took a lot of pictures, about 700 of them. We are not going to be doing that. We're only doing maybe 20 pictures a time or a week to kind of give you an idea of what Israel was like and what we experienced and how the takeaways of growing closer with the Word of God became very apparent to me. And also the feeling that I received my marching orders from the Lord in boldness by being there, by the fact that I saw where Jesus walked, where the disciples ministered, what Jesus did in his miracles, where Jesus spoke, and sing it for yourself. It's almost as if I was a disciple being taught by the Lord, and now I've been commissioned. So that was unexpected, actually, as a takeaway. I didn't expect to have that feeling, which was wonderful because I didn't think about it. And when we left Israel, that's basically a very strong part of how I felt. So a wonderful takeaway from that aspect. So as we go through Israel, we'll be talking about those things a little bit. Also, I want to wish everyone a very happy Memorial Day tomorrow. And I hope that tomorrow will be a day that we spend in somewhat of time to reflect on the lives of those who've given their lives for our freedom in this country, in the United States of America. So it is and should be one of the most important, really, holidays of the year for us. It is a Memorial Day for us to remember. And so I do tip my hat and we honor all those who may be watching, who have even served in the military or know someone who has given their life for the defense of our nation. That's what tomorrow is really about. So we want to honor all those soldiers, men and women who have died for protecting our freedoms. So happy Memorial Day, and that is tomorrow. I hope you enjoy it tomorrow as well, and I hope that you reflect on that a little bit as well. Okay, now our time together, we're going to be looking at, yes. Oh, one more thing. There's going to be, a little statement I'll make at the end of our service today, and I'll explain that later. So we've been in James chapter 4. And today, believe it or not, I know it's hard to believe this, we're going to finish chapter 4 today. And it's not going to be long. I know that's even hard to believe too, because I'm covering verses 11 through 17. That's a lot of verses for me. And you would think that I could take a verse or 2 or 3 and go for weeks on it. Not today. We're going to be actually working through these verses relatively quickly, and then we'll be set up for what comes in chapter 5, and we begin that next week. So that will be a little taste of coming attractions that we'll have beginning next week. But today we complete chapter 4. So if you've got your Bibles ready, open your Bibles up to James chapter 4, and then we'll go ahead and begin from there. Before we do all of that, we'll also open in prayer. So let's open in prayer now and give this time to the Lord and ask for the Spirit to be with us this evening and Jesus' presence to be with us too. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We ask that you would bless it. And Lord, that you would fill this place, that you would fill all the homes of those who are partaking and are part of our service tonight. We pray, Lord, that you would be honored and glorified by the words, that we would understand, grow in our faith, and grow in our obedience and submission to you. Lord, this is what we've been told. This is what the Dr. James has been sharing with us. And Lord, I pray that we would understand what he is trying to share with us, so we would grow in our faith and grow in our behavior, that we would grow closer to you, we'd be more Christ-like and consistent in our Christianity. And Father, that is very important that we would be and remain consistent. So Father, help us as we look at these verses to put priority first and to understand the importance of your will above all things. That is really the key of today's message. And so, Father, we lift it to you, and we ask that you be glorified and honored by it in Jesus' precious name. We say all these things. Amen. All right, James chapter 4. Now, as you may remember, we've been talking about James as a doctor. I keep referring to him like a doctor. Now, James isn't a doctor. He's not a medical doctor, and he wasn't a Juris Doctor, and he wasn't a PhD holder. But what I mean by James being a doctor is that in a symbolic sense, he is giving us a diagnosis of our problem. Now, what's the problem? Well, the real problem is ourself. It all begins with James saying, what's your problem? What's the issues? What are the things that you quarrel about? Why are there so many discords among you? Why is there discontent? Why is there warring, quarreling, arguing, troubles between you? Well, isn't really the problem you? This is what James is saying. Isn't it really what's inside your mind, your heart, your ambitions, the things that you want more than anything else above others? Isn't it really your selfish desires that are really causing the troubles between you and others, friends, other brothers and sisters in the Lord? Isn't that the reason why you're having trouble with God? And isn't it the reason why you're also having conflict with yourself? And so James begins to lay out the issues in chapter 4 of why these problems are, and it comes right down to ourselves. And he understands that the pathology of the problem is directed to the inner issues that we've never really given to the Lord. James is not talking to unbelievers in chapter 4. If you read chapter 4, you would think he was. That's the problem. The sins of the Christian sometimes go as deep as the sins of the unbeliever, and that is a problem too. The Christian church, the history of the church, has not been a idyllic, stellar report, has it? It's actually been a report that has been somewhat reaching, a report that has not been at the standard that Jesus has established the church to be. And so James is saying, look, if you want to grow in your faith, if you want to be a victor as a Christian in life, you're going to have to understand that you are submitting to God and He comes first. Your ambitions, your drives must be controlled by the drivetrain of God's will, not yours. And that is what James is really homing in on here. He's really focusing on the aspect that we need to give the Lord really our plans, our ambitions, our goals, our desires. And therefore, as he ends chapter 4, he begins to focus on this aspect of the future. He begins to focus on this aspect of what you really want to achieve, and are the goals and loves and ambitions and programs in your heart, in your mind that you would like to accomplish in life, are they under the submission of God? And is your heart in a state of humbleness? Now, we ended our message last time with verses 7 and 10. Those two verses are really the capstone of a very important demeanor, position that the Christian needs to be in. The Christian needs to, first of all, understand that we have to be in submission to God, to let God lead, verse 7. And verse 10, if you want to be elevated in God's kingdom, if you want to be elevated in life, then we have to learn to humble ourselves in the sight of Him. And if we do that, He will then lift us up. So with those prerequisites laid out, He's going to lay out now some more issues. But we have to understand that our way of dealing with them has to come from those two prerequisites, submission and humbling of ourselves. All right, are you ready with that? Now, take a deep breath. Let's take a look now at verses 11, moving on. So I'm going to read to you verses 11 and 12, and I only will read verses 11 and 12, and then we'll look at verses 13 through 17 as a group. So there's two groups of things, 11 and 12, and then verses 13 through 17. James chapter 4, verse 11. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren? He that speaks evil of his brother and judges his brother makes evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, are you not a doer of the law, but a judge? There is only one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you that you judge another? Now that's an important statement. It may seem at first very confusing. What the bottom line is basically this. What James is saying is, if you truly are submitted to God, if you truly are humble, if you are drawing close to God, if you're resisting the devil, verses 7, 8, 9, and 10 of chapter 4, then you're not going to be condemning everyone around you. Oh, you may have good reason for that. You may think, that person's rotten. And I got to tell everyone about that. I got to tell everyone that they're rotten. You may have good reason to condemn someone. James is saying, no, you don't. You see, because we should be doing two things. If you begin to condemn those around you, though you may feel there's a reason to do so, here's the problem. You make yourself above the law. This is what James is saying. You're saying you're putting yourself above the law. Well, wait a minute here. There's only one lawgiver. There's only one lawgiver that has the right to justify someone, the right to save someone. And that isn't you. It isn't me. And so he's saying there's two things you need to remember. We have to certainly be doers of the law, and then we have to be obedient to the law. And the person who takes out of their time of the day to condemn others is putting themselves on a higher shelf, into a place, into an elevation that they were never allowed to be in the first place. And James is saying, you do not have the right to be there. You are not given that privilege. You don't have that pay grade, so to speak, that rank to be up there as the lawgiver. The lawgiver is the condemner. Vengeance is mine, says who? The Lord. But in humanity, in history, in human behavior, we all think that we need to impose the vengeance. But it is God who says, vengeance is mine. That's a very hard thing, especially if you feel like you want to wage vengeance on somebody. God help us for that. But that temptation hits all of us because we're human. And we still have to deal with the old man. I'm talking to the Christian here. The old man comes up and the old issues may come up and people may rub us the wrong way. And what James is really saying is, be careful here. If you're in a position where you want to condemn someone, you put yourself out of the law. You're no longer under it. You're no longer obedient to it. You are now acting as arbiter of the law, and you don't have that right. Now, the condemnation term here is not trying to deal with someone who is going through sin. The condemning is condemning to hell, or someone who is acting as if they're the full judge, jury, and trial lawyer and everyone else in between, laying on judgment upon somebody. We have the right to be fruit inspectors. We have the right to look at someone's life, and if something is happening in that person's life affecting others, it's our responsibility in love to share our concern with that individual, whether they have an addiction towards something or they have behavior problems that are affecting all kinds of people. It is not right for us to sit back and just watch the disintegration occur. It is our responsibility to, in love, exhort, that is, warn in love, to warn someone in love. This here has to do with someone condemning someone in a totality sense, if I could use that phrase right. A total sense, a complete sense, a spiritual sense. Now, in Titus chapter 3, verse 2, we find that we are encouraged by Paul when he writes to his student Titus. Titus was a young man just like Timothy, who was like a prodigy of Paul. And in Titus chapter 3, verse 2, he basically tells Titus to not judge any man until the time that Christ comes. In other words, don't make condemnations against others. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5, also written by Paul, deals with the issue of judging. Be careful how we handle this. Now, with that said, we then take that aspect and we now move to verse 13. Now, verse 13 to verse 17 has a lot to do with understanding God's will for our lives. something that sometimes we forget a lot, because in our world, we like to make plans. We have calendars, we have planners, we have all kinds of things that tell us what we should be doing on a certain day. And for some people, they can't do anything unless they look at their calendar. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But we have to understand that in life, we do have a tension. That tension between what God has willed and what we want. And that tension stays with us the rest of our lives. And no matter how long you've been a Christian or how little of time you've been a Christian, that tension is always existing. It's almost like a monster we have to fight every day. And that's because in life we have obligations, we have responsibilities, and then we have what seem to be good things like planning out our future, planning out our dreams, so to speak, or maybe our ambitions, and those things may be gifts that God has given us. But James is holding back on us in this, and he wants to peel away the real purposes for why we plan the way that we do. And sometimes we forget two important realities that we all seem to forget, and he's going to bring them up. Let's look at verse 13. Here's what James says in James 4:13. Go to now, all you that say today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain or get a profit. Whereas you know, verse 14, not what shall you be tomorrow? For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Now, what is James saying here? He's saying there are many of you who in your life go out and you say, we're going to do this. We're going to make a killing. We've got an idea. I don't know, maybe it's crypto, maybe it's investment, whatever it is, we're going to make a killing because tomorrow or today or someday in the future, we're going to go this, we're going to go to this place and we're going to stay there for a while and we're going to make investments and we're going to make a profit from those investments. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. The only problem is there's assumptions made by the person that James is referring to that the person cannot make. And there are two assumptions. Number one, that they have control of their time. They have control of the results, that they have control of what they're going to do. And then number two, they have forgotten that their life is a vapor, that their life is something that is just blows, like a flower that blooms and is gone, or just like a puff of smoke, a vapor, a breath, if you will. And what James is saying is, you have no idea what is going to happen tomorrow. And you have no idea, you've forgotten that your life is fragile, with a capital F, may I add. It's very fragile. And that fragility is forgotten when you talk about the things that you're going to gain in this world. Now, the world is always going to have this aspect of gain, of always wanting to get more and more and more. And the thing about it is that we all have needs. We all have responsibilities, and we do need to sort of plan. If you've got children, if you've got a home, if you've got a financial goal that you need to, if you have financial issues you need to resolve, those are all fine and good things that we have to do. But we have to recognize and realize that what we do has to be considered under two important things. Number one, we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. And number two, our life is fragile, so much so that James looks at us as a vapor. Or the Bible looks at us as a flower that blooms and is gone. And if we understood those two realities, then our approach to what we want to do in the world of profit and gain would be more circumspect. It would be more calibrated, carefully, and with respect to one very important thing. And that is the issue of God's will. So James is saying ultimately in chapter 4, verse 13, that there is an issue. Remember, we have to submit ourselves to God and we humble ourselves. If we have submitted to God and we're humble, we're not going to have an arrogance. And that's going to come back later in this chapter in verse 16. That's going to be an issue we're going to deal with in a moment. the issue of arrogance or boasting. So if we're humble, we'll have the right attitude. And then number two, if we actually have the submission to God right, then we're going to have the right attitude about our plans. Now, what is the right attitude that we should have about our plans? That's a good question, isn't it? Well, first of all, we learn in verse 13 one thing. We learn that we have an idea of we're going to spend time somewhere. We're going to go somewhere to such a particular city, and then we're going to work there for a while, or we're going to work on a deal or something. And then we will buy, we will sell, and then we'll gain a profit. Now, verse 14 gives us the reason why that's a foolish way of thinking. He says, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And he says, what is life? You're breathing, you're walking, you're sleeping, you're waking, you're eating. Your energy spent, your energy consumed, your energy gained. What all that is about here is something very fragile that's going to leave you immediately. Now, we learn about these traits a little bit in the Bible itself. For example, if you want to read about how God thinks of us and how the Bible thinks of us as a vapor, may I suggest a couple of verses to look at? Look at Job chapter 7, verses 6 through 9. Look at those verses. Look at Psalm 39, verses 4 through 6. Look at Psalm 144, verses 3 through 4. This will give you an idea of what our life is like, a vapor, that it's very fleeting, that it's very fragile, that in the course of human history and in the course of God's eternality, we are nothing. We come and go. I hope, this is just a personal encouragement to you. I hope that as you assess your life, no matter what your age is, you could be 90 years old, you could be 10, whatever age you are. I hope that we can learn to assess our life in the fact that we are just a moment that we come and then we will expire. And that what we do for the Lord, what we do in God's will, in that time frame, that hyphen, if you will, on a tombstone, that hyphen on a tombstone, your year of birth, the hyphen, and the year of your death, that hyphen is what you did with that time, no matter how long or how short it is. What we do with that time matters. It's not the year that you die, the age that you die. It's not the year that you were born. It is what you do with that hyphen. And that hyphen means a lot, and it says a lot. And for some people, they've lived 5 lives and may have died at the age of 30. I know many people, well, not many personally, but we know of historical people who have done great things by the time they were 30. Putting aside Jesus, of course, at 33 years of age. Let's put him aside because he's God the Son and the Son of God. But putting that aside, you know there are people who have accomplished many things. Alexander the Great died in his early 30s. Franz Schubert, now you may not know who he is, a great composer, wrote just as many symphonies as Beethoven. He died at 32 years of age. He wrote just as many piano sonatas as Mozart did. An amazing accomplishment for a composer who died so young. Felix Mendelssohn died at the age of 37. Now, there's an old saying, the flames that burn bright are the ones that go out first. And I would say that saying is very true for someone like Schubert or someone like Mendelssohn. Specifically Felix Mendelssohn, because he just died of exhaustion. By the time he was 18 years old, he wrote almost just as much music as Mozart. And not only that, by the time he was 16, he was considered a genius. I mean, I'm still working on that, I think. I think I'm still working on that. He was already a genius at 16. And here's the deal. And he kept writing and writing and writing and writing. And yet in that time of his life, he has written enough where there have been performers, conductors, musicians who have studied his music and endlessly have studied it for their whole lifetime. So a 37-year-old man or a 32-year-old man die, and yet 100, 200, 250 years later, you find that there are people now, and there will be people who will study their music, get PhDs because of it, analyze their music until the kingdom of Christ comes. So that short life they had actually did something. It enhanced life. In the case of Felix Mendelssohn, I would think that we'll probably hopefully see him in heaven. I hope the same thing for Franz Schubert. I would think there was something they had on the ball, especially with Felix Mendelssohn, but also hopefully with Schubert, on the ball with God, because their music suggests something on that level. And that's what makes it important and elevating. But having said that, I know I'm on a little bit of a tangent. But having said that, I hope that we can realize that we're only here for a certain amount of time. And my prayer is that God that I recognize to God, I acknowledge to God, Lord, my life is here, and I know that one day I'll face my last day. Help me to give you the investment that you've put into me. Help me to give back to you what you've given to me as a vessel to be used for your glory. I think that is a good attitude to have as a Christian. It'll help to not waste time. We don't live long enough to really have the luxury of wasting time, but you know what? We all kind of do, don't we? And the idea is to make sure that we can really get our time controlled. And that itself is a subject for another time. But nonetheless, we do fail. Sometimes we have victory in this area. But if we pray to the Lord, ask God for help, he will do so. Now, I'm saying all this because the basic importance of life is that we have to recognize life is short and we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. With that said, let's look at verse 15. And it says this, James is writing, for what we ought to say is this. This is how we should conduct our life, is what James is saying. If the Lord will, we shall live and do this or do that. What's James saying? He's saying that if you are asked, hey, Craig, what you up to? Well, if the Lord wills, I plan to do these things. It's God's call. It's not my call. I may have all the plans in the world, but God's the one who's going to open the doors and shut the doors. It's God's will. Because I don't know. I may die tonight. I may die tomorrow. I may live 120 years. I have no idea. All I know is if it's God's will, then we'll do this or do that. And that's how James is saying this. He's saying, don't boast. Don't be arrogant in what you think you're going to accomplish. And by the way, every one of us, even innocently, does this. We all do this. And it's hard not to. Why? Because what's the first thing you get from people when you haven't seen them in a while? Hey, what you been up to? Hey, what you going to do tomorrow? What are your plans for the year? I mean, haven't you ever had a job interview and you have that boss that interviews you and says, hey, candidate, what is your 5-year plan? You ever got that question? I have. Let me tell you, that question is something that the world wants you to have. What James is saying is, no, you're not to have that plan. What we should be saying is, what is God's will for you tomorrow, the next day, the next week? If God wills, we will do this or do that. So the answer to the 5-year plan is, if God wills, we hope to do these things, but it's God's call, not mine. That's what James is saying. Understanding that we submit, remember, chapter 4, verse 7, submit yourselves to the Lord. If we submit, then the attitude is right and we won't have the boasting. We won't have the unjustified and unqualified arrogance and audacity to tell the world what we plan to do. Now, verse 16. But now we rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. That's basically the bottom line is you spend time with pomp and circumstance and with obliviations about what you're going to do. And it's all about me, and what kind of financial gain we're going to get and what kind of killing we're going to experience, and having the doors and the windows wide open for all kinds of wonderful treasures. If that is your heart, then what he says here is he says, all such rejoicing. He doesn't say bragging. He says rejoicing is evil. Now, keep in mind the word evil you may think is meaning devilish or satanic. What it means here in this context for the word evil is it means that you, as a person trying to live with your own plans without consideration for God, are going to have a hard time of it. You're going to have pain. You're going to have anguish, and that pain and anguish will not be only in your life, it'll be in the life of all those around you. Your children, your family, your wife, your friends, they're all going to feel your pain as you're going through your mode of operation, your modus operandi of gain and profit without consideration of anyone else, and specifically God. And it's going to create an evil in your life, a pain in your life. Discord is going to affect every nook and cranny of your life. And you know that many people who have sought to serve mammon, or I should say money, the same thing. Mammon was the god of wealth. Many people who have served mammon have destroyed their lives. And what James is saying is, don't let that be you. Do not be a statistic. As a Christian, you should know better. You can't serve mammon and God at the same time. You serve God, and then He will produce what He wills for your life. And we trust in that. And then we use the giftings He's given to us to the best of our abilities, to the best of our energy, to utilize the importance of strong work and focus on God and His strength to do the jobs and the tasks He has for us day to day. And God will then, in His will, open the doors of blessings that come to you. But remember, those blessings are for a reason. Remember the old parable Jesus gave about the man who built barns? He had so much wealth and he had a barn, and the barn got filled up, and he said, "Oh, I'm taken care of. I've got everything that I need." And so what does this man do? Well, he creates new barns and puts all his excess into these new barns. And what does Jesus say? He says, the Lord God says, "You fool, today your soul is required of you." Now, on the surface, the man didn't do anything wrong. He was just being a good steward of his wealth. But here's the problem. His plan to do and organize his things was not done with any consideration towards what God wanted to be done with his wealth. Was he thinking of giving to the poor or sharing or giving of his resource to those in need? No, it says in the text that he built bigger barns for who? Himself. He may have had every great intention. But here was the problem. The man building that barn to put his things in did not know that he was going to die that night. That was the point James is making. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. And when you die, it's done. Your work is done. The hyphen is set. And you go to God, and you go to God with what you have done. And there's no takebacks. There's no retesting. There isn't any do-overs. And what God tells this man is, you fool. You are rich for yourself, but you are not rich towards God. That's what James is saying. It's not the wealth. It's not your resources. It's not that. It's not the issue. The issue is the heart. If God's blessed you abundantly, that's a wonderful thing. And rejoice in that. But rejoice that God's will be done in your life through those things that you have received. If you don't have a lot in life, rejoice in that. Why? Because God's probably saved you from a lot of evil times and temptations that you may have had trouble dealing with had you had all the resources that you wished and desired for yourself. But also, too, maybe God has said, in time, you will receive those things. In time. God has a very different timetable than I think you and I do. I think you would agree with that. So, boasting leads to basically a life of misery. That's what it says here. All such rejoicing is misery, evil. And then it says here, something interesting. It says this. Verse 17, last verse. Therefore, to him that knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. Now, there are a couple points I want to make about this. First of all, there are two types of sins. This is a general statement here. Two types of sins. There's a sins of commission and sins of omission. I want to say that again, just in case you're like, what did I just say? There's sins of commission and there's sins of omission. What does that mean? Well, there's sins that we commit. We know what that is, right? We lied, we cheated, we stole something. Okay. That's a commission. So we committed a crime, a sin. A sin of omission is when we know we should be doing something that's right and we choose not to do it. Every one of us, and I know we've all been guilty of this, there have been times where there's something that I knew I probably should have done and I chose not to do it. I didn't commit a sin by an act of willful volition, but what I did is I committed sin by not doing what I knew I needed to do or should have done. And that happens, those opportunities of doing those things, of doing what you should do, happen quite often. Could be helping somebody. It could be doing something for your family, or doing something for a friend, or doing something you needed to do for work, or being responsible with something that you know you kind of have to take care of, but you're putting it off. That's a sin of omission. You're not committing the sin, but you're committing it by not doing what you should be doing. So those are two things there. That's a general aspect of what could be also meant by what James is also saying here. But the other question is this, the other aspect of this verse has to deal with the issue of, are you giving God the purposes of your life? Are you allowing God to be in control of your life? Are you submitting to God through your life? And the person who is guilty of verse 13, the person who says, well, I'm going to be doing this and this and this and that. Well, that person who's committed the sin of verse 13, and they have read these verses that follow. They've learned that their life is a vapor. They've learned they have no idea what to do tomorrow. They've learned that tomorrow we have no idea what it'll be and what will happen. And then we're also told in verse 15 that we have the antidote. How should we then live? How should we then act? How should our behavior be? Oh, we'll do these things if God says we will do those things. Okay, you know all this. Well, if you know those things now, and you still don't do them by verse 17, you're still sinning. This is what James is saying. So verse 17 is not a verse that is out of context from what we've read. Some people may find it difficult to connect it because you're like, what does that have to do with what we've been reading? Well, it has to do with the behavior. James is saying, you now know. I've given you the diagnosis, I've laid out the pathology, and I've given you the antidote. And the antidote says very simply this: if God wills, submit yourself to God, humble yourself to God, resist the devil, draw close to God, he'll draw close to you. You know all these things. And if you know them, then you should not be having the bravura, the audacity to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I will achieve this, I'm going to gain that. You should be humble and be saying, Lord, if you will, we'll do these things. If you will, we'll accomplish these things. And what he's saying is, if you know all that and you're not doing it, it's sin to you still. And if you do know and you do it, then you're doing good. You're now learning what James is trying to teach us. Okay. Now, I hope that is a blessing to you of looking at James chapter 4. One more thing I want to say about giving God glory. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31, these words: therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Now, you may think that verse doesn't have much gravitas to it. You may think, oh, well, okay, I get it. Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. But that verse is really a liberating verse. He's saying that whatever you do, it doesn't mean you've got to be a president or a CEO or have to be some millionaire or have to be someone who is gaining all the worldly trappings of success. Whatever you do, you're going for a walk, give God glory for that. Why? Because God's giving you the ability to walk. Do you paint or try to paint or try to draw? Maybe you're not a good drawer. Whatever you are doing artistically, just do it. Because in doing that, God gave you the pen, he gave you the pencil, he gave you the watercolor, he gave you the paintbrush, and he gave you the ability to do those things. Do it to the glory of God. Do you play music? Do it to the glory of God. Whatever you do, and it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't be painting or playing music. It could be as simple as putting a fork into your mouth. Simple as putting a spoon into your mouth, or walking or sitting or catching a ball, whatever you do, give it to the glory of God. That's the starting point. That is a great place to start understanding what James is trying to teach us here. Now, with that said, next week we begin chapter 5, the last of the instructive chapters of this incredible applicable book to our Christian life. We start that next week. All right, without further ado now, let's talk about our trip to Israel. You've already seen our some of the pictures we had last week. We went to Netanya, Caesarea, Mount Carmel, and we ended last week with a panorama of Galilee. We're going to start with that panorama of Galilee and then lead into what we did in Galilee for the most part today. That'll be kind of what we'll be doing. Next week, we'll kind of hopefully get to the north of Galilee and then maybe also to Jerusalem. I'm hoping we'll do that. This may be a four-part series we'll do. So here we go. Are you ready? Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, may I tell you now, it is better if you go to YouTube, because on YouTube, you will see the photographs that we have. You will not see them on Facebook. So just keep that in mind. If you were on Facebook, go to YouTube, Scarlet on Stone, click on that, and then you will see the pictures as we go through. Okay? All right. With that said, without further ado, let me go ahead and move ourselves to where we'll be. Now, we're going to start first with the video that we had last week. Now, this video, and by the way, as I show the pictures, you'll still hear me. So here we are. This video here is a panorama of Galilee. So you're seeing Galilee, a little bit of the cities there, and you'll be seeing the Sea of Galilee looking at the north right now. Then as it pans, you're looking at the east side of Galilee. Those hills across Galilee is the Golan Heights. And then we're heading kind of towards south. And then you'll see a city. And that big city there on the hill is Tiberias. Now that's mentioned in the Bible as well. So that gives you an idea there. Let me do that again just to show you. This is again Galilee. And I'm taking this from the Mount Arbel. That's A-R-B-E-L. Highest point in Galilee. This mount will show up in several other pictures. So there. Now, one more thing. I'm pausing this right now. If you look down the hill, you'll see a little city. You'll see some homes and things right on the shore of Galilee. That is where Magdala is. And I'm going to be showing you what we did there. So after we were here, we went straight to Magdala. And we'll be going to that little place after this picture that you'll be seeing here. If you look straight up to the far part of the sea here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. You probably can't, but you'll see that it's more remote on the other side. That's where we stayed in Galilee, and it was very beautiful staying there. Okay, let's continue. So the panorama continues, and I mentioned that you'll see the Golan Heights. That's basically a very important area there. And then, of course, Tiberias, which you'll see right over here. All right. No, I paused it for a moment. Now, we have here in the same picture. This is not the panorama. And then that is the picture we'll be going to Magdala and then heading from there. If you wanted to know how we were traveling, by the way, just in case you want to know how we were traveling, we had a very luxurious bus. Here was our bus we had. We were on the red bus. You can see the red sticker, the red thing in the front. And that was our bus of travels. And this bus at this moment in this picture is taken at Mount Arbel. So from this bus, there's about a half-mile trek up to the mountain that you just saw me take the video from. So that is our bus. That's exciting, I guess. And then we were in Mount Arbel. Once we got back into the bus, we headed to Magdala. Now, Magdala may mean nothing to you, but you probably have heard of a woman named Mary Magdalene. Magdalene is Mary from Magdala. So Magdalene is her name, but actually it's really where she's from. So Mary Magdalene, Mary from Magdala. We're actually going to the city that she was from. Now, when we got there, the reason why we're going there is because back in 2006, 2007, and more specifically 2009, they discovered the remains of a synagogue that existed during the time of Jesus. Here's a picture of that, of the excavation that was done of a synagogue. Now, this was recent. This was only in 2009. Now, here's the question. Well, wait a minute here. That's 2009. What was happening on this land beforehand? Well, nothing was. You see, in Israel, they have a rule. If you want to build a building, you can build. But here's the deal. If you start drilling and you hit something like stone, you have to stop. And then the government comes in, and what they do is they bring their archaeologists and they excavate. And they will not allow you to build until the excavation is complete. In other words, your project is over. And they'll excavate and see what they find. If it's something important, then they will certainly own that land and take that land, and you'll have to go somewhere else to do your building. Now, so with that said, this was excavated recently, and this was learned to be a synagogue, and it's dated to be about 2,000 years old. It is possible, very possible, that Jesus himself was in this synagogue. Here's another picture of it here. And this right here is an aerial view of the synagogue. So it is from 2009. This is an aerial view of it. And you'll see, if you look at the square section, that there's a little box. It looks like a little kind of a box you'll see in that squared off section. That is the important find here. Let's take a better look at what that box looks like. It looks like this. That is actually not the original box. That is a very, very, very good replica of the box. It's a slab of stone. Now, if you look at the slab of stone very carefully, you will see that this slab of stone has what looks like a menorah. I hope you see the menorah there. Well, did you know that this menorah was the oldest menorah ever seen on any archaeological dig in Israel's history? And what makes it so fascinating is that this stone slab was basically designed after the menorah that was in Herod's temple, which is why this is dated to be at the time of Jesus. Now, the real stone slab is in the Jerusalem Museum. It's too valuable to have just laying there, but they made an extremely accurate replica and placed it exactly where it was found, in the position it was found when the excavations were made. Here's another image of that stone there, of that stone slab. This is another side of it. Arches that are seen representing elements of the temple. So again, this is a very important find. It showed that the menorah was known, and this was a replica of what occurred or what was existing in the temple 2,000 years ago. Now, from here, from Magdala, we just walked a little ways to what was kind of a center, like a church area, and it was called Duc in Altum. It's Latin for basically come and spread your net, or come into the boat. And this area here has basically 4 chapels. This is the entrance into the building. Yes, it is beautiful. It's very ornate. The Catholics control this, but there's also elements of the Orthodox Church in this as well. Now, the reason why we were in this building was because if you look at the picture in front of you, you'll see in front of you a very big little area. It looks like a sanctuary with a boat. If you look to the left, you'll see another opening for another sanctuary. And if you look to the right, you'll see another, looks like glass opening for another one. Well, there are 4 in all together. What you're looking at right here is the boat gallery, in a sense. And so this is the boat area, where it's a church, but it has a boat, and your view is the beautiful Sea of Galilee. The reason why we're here, however, is that they have made an environment for below this floor, on the bottom floor, the real stones of Magdala during 2,000 years ago have been intact. And you can go downstairs and stand and sit on them, and it gives you an idea of what someone living in Magdala would have experienced on the stones. Let me show that to you here. Now, this is the area where the stones are. Now, I took a picture of a beautiful picture. This is actually a painting. And this painting is of a hand of a woman who is touching Jesus. This comes from, I believe, Luke 5. What's that? oh, forgive me, John 5, where the woman with the issue of blood touches the hem of Jesus' garment and is healed. This painting is painted. It is absolutely gorgeous. That's why I took a picture of it. But everything around the painting, all the stones you see, except for that stone table you see there, everything is original from the excavations they have done. And so it's, again, it gives you an idea of what a sort of sitting area would be, a walking area would be living at that time. Then we're going to come back to the boat chapel here. The boat chapel is inside here. That's what this is called. You'll notice that there are iconic pictures. This is where the Greek Orthodox kind of has this influence. You'll see pictures, iconic pictures, or Greek Orthodox saint pictures. You'll see in the foreground or in the faraway ground, the Sea of Galilee with the Golan Heights behind, and this very nice looking boat. This is a place where actually services are held, and a place also where they have teachings and places where people could come and just study if they want to. And then there's a picture of another room. Let me show you another room here. This is called the Mosaic Chapel. This is a beautiful mosaic of Jesus calling the disciples. Remember, Jesus called the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. That's what they were doing. They were fishermen. So we know that Peter, Andrew, James, and John were all fishermen, and this mosaic is showing that. Then we have something else very beautiful here. We have the ceiling. So if we go back to this picture here, I'll just show you this picture here. And if I were to look at the ceiling of that room, the big opening room, it would be this. So that's a very beautiful picture. Actually, it's larger than I can take. This is the center of it. And so it's a beautiful painting of praying hands with a beautiful sky with stars. It is absolutely very beautiful. And that is a beautiful shot. So when we left this place, Duke in Altum, which is the center for study and history, we left here. We left the Magdala synagogue. That was the end of our first day. I want to say that again to you. So what happened was we went to Netanya. We went to Caesarea, Mount Carmel. We drove to Sea of Galilee. We went to Mount Arbel. We went to Magdala, went to the center, and that finally was the end of our day. It was a very long day, and it started at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yes, we did too. Now, the next day, we ended up going to the very famous place called Capernaum. Now, Capernaum, as you already know, is the place where Jesus taught, where Jesus stayed, where Peter lived, and where he called those disciples. Here they are. Well, here's the Capernaum. This is a synagogue that was discovered. Now, this synagogue is lying above another synagogue right below it. It is believed that this particular synagogue was dated after the time of Jesus. The one below is the one that Jesus would have most likely have taught in. He did teach in all the synagogues in the Galilean region. He was an itinerant preacher. So he would be invited to different synagogues to teach and to share. And so this is the land in which he would have been in and would have seen. Here's another picture as well of it. This is the left side of this synagogue and this ancient place. And then here is a quick little panorama video giving you the left and the right side of it. So it gives you an idea of what this would look like. So very Greek looking, very, as you can see, very ancient looking, but it is a synagogue. This is not a Greek temple. Now what you're looking at is something very interesting. This here is Peter's home. This is believed to be his home. There's apparently no debate about this. This is it. So what you're looking at is Peter's home. Now you're probably going to wonder, what is this structure above Peter's home? Well, what is this? I'll get to that in a moment, but let me just show you what Peter's home looks like. Okay, let's do that again. I'll show it to you again. So here's Peter's home. That's all the rock formations you see there. Okay. Now, this guy right here is a church. This building was built over Peter's home. Now, you see, the Catholics wanted to build something. They wanted to build something on Peter's home, but the government didn't allow that. So what happened is they decided to build over it, and they got permission to do it. So this sort of spaceship-looking kind of funky building, believe it or not, is a church. They have services in this place, and it's built by the Catholics to be right over Peter's living quarters. Jesus himself was in those living quarters. I'll give you another panorama of it here to see it. You also will see to the right, do you see these stairs on the right? Those are the stairs you walk up to go into the church service. So if you live in this area in Capernaum and you're Catholic, you can go to a church service here if you want. So that is what this area is here. I want to show this to you one more time. These are very, very quick. So this is the church building that is sitting over Peter's home. Okay, now from there, we went straight to the Sea of Galilee. We got to go on the sea. Here's a picture of the boat. And this is just a portion. There was about 100 of us in our group. So this is about a good portion of them. They're also on the other side. We're leaving the Sea of Galilee. We are about just maybe about 1 or 2 miles north of Peter's home, the video you just saw. So we're not far away from the old synagogue and Peter's home. Peter's home, by the way, was just right around the corner from that synagogue that you saw the pillars of. So here's the first picture here of us in the boat, Sea of Galilee. Here's another picture of us. I want you to look at this picture carefully. You will see in the distance a mountaintop. That mountaintop you see in the distance is Mount Arbel. That is where I took the panorama of the Sea of Galilee. So now you see its location in relation to where you are, where we are in this boat right here. And our awesome tour guide and an amazing Messianic Christian who also is a great IDF officer and just a wealth of knowledge is at the right side coming down the steps there in his black shirt. Here's another picture here. This is an amazing picture and a very important one. We're on the boat at the Sea of Galilee, and what you're seeing here is the Mount of Beatitudes. This is where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. It is this little hill right here. Now you will see, as you look at the hill, there are two structures. There's a kind of a white, kind of square structure, kind of to the upper right, and there's more what looks like a rounded top structure to the left on top of the mount, to the hill here. And we'll have pictures of those. Those were put there by the Catholics as well. However, I'm going to tell you a little bit of information. That rounded little building, we'll see a better picture of it in a moment, was put there, believe it or not, by Mussolini. Mussolini wanted the Catholic support in his fight against those in his country when he wanted to have control as a fascist. So what he did to get the Catholics on his side is he took the money that he was taking from Italy and he basically gave it for them to build that church right there. So that church was built in the 1930s, early 30s. It's still there today. In my opinion, they should tear it down. But it is in a beautiful location. It is in a beautiful place. The Mount of Beatitudes is gorgeous. I have to say, I wish I could have spent more time there. It was very, very beautiful. But to imagine Jesus giving his Sermon on the Mount, Matthew's chapters 5, 6, and 7, that there's nothing like it to know that is where it happened right there. Amazing, amazing. Now, what you're going to see next is extremely important. This will give you a fact about the Bible you never knew. This is my panorama of the most important aspect of Jesus' ministry. This is a panorama of the Sea of Galilee from the Sea of Galilee, looking at the shore. I want you to watch this very carefully. We're going to do this twice. Because what you're seeing is not just a shoreline. Take it all in. Take it all in. Okay, I'm going to do that again. What you just saw was all of the land where Jesus did 70% of all of his miracles. If you read the Gospels, you will say that most of his ministry took place in that camera shot right there. We start at Mount Arbel. we move north. The camera's facing west. So we're looking at the more populated area of the Sea of Galilee. And the camera's panning north. And you'll see Capernaum. You will see the Mount of Beatitudes. You will see Magdala, all those areas there. You'll see where Jesus called his disciples, at least all the ones that were fishermen. And they're all there. All of that represents a majority of the ministry of Jesus. Okay, let's watch it again. So now you see it. 70% of all of his miracles and the majority of his ministry is all caught in this one shot. So Mount Arbel, right there on the left. If you have a black screen, it will turn to the video in a moment. It'll take a moment. In that shot, you will see the Mount of Beatitudes as well. You also see where we left, where we embarked off from, and it's all there. Capernaum, from Mount Arbel to Capernaum. That is all incorporated there. It's an amazing shot. All right. One of my favorite shots of the entire trip, by the way, just because it had so much of the ministry of Jesus. All right, here's a shot of me and my beautiful wife. And this is and I want to show you, this shot's an important one, because in the background of the shot is the Mount of Beatitudes. I took the shot purposely because of that. So this is the Mount of Beatitudes in the distance. And then you see my beautiful wife and myself there saying that shot. So this is not just me taking photographs from online. I'm actually on the Sea of Galilee. Proof that I was there. Now, from the Sea of Galilee, and by the way, remember, the Sea of Galilee is the sea in which Jesus walked on. It's the sea in which he created the miracles of the fish. It's a sea where he calmed the storm. It's the sea where after his resurrection, he got Peter to get more fish, and they ate fish on the shore. After his resurrection, Jesus had a love for the Sea of Galilee. Now, from there, we went to the Mount of Beatitudes. So here's another picture of my beautiful wife and I at the Beatitudes. This is us, and the Sea of Galilee is in the background, and we are at that church that Mussolini had built. Right there. And then here is a video montage or video panorama of the Mount of Beatitudes right here. You will see the Sea of Galilee here. You're seeing that there. And as we pan towards the west, we're looking towards Mount Arbel and, of course, where Magdala is. You can't see that because of the palm trees. Here is the church that Mussolini built right there. You'll see that there. And as you can see, it looks like a beautiful garden. It's a gorgeous place. So you'll see that very well, very beautiful. And then I kind of do a full 360 here. And so there's other beautiful gardens, beautifully manicured lawns, and other beautiful things there. So that is, again, a panorama of the Mount of Beatitudes. We'll do it one more time without me pausing it. Okay, now from there we went north, just north of Magdala, to a kibbutz, but a very organized one that has a museum. And in the museum, we saw this. Now, this is the oldest sailing vessel ever excavated on the Sea of Galilee. Now, this was excavated relatively recently, I believe back in 2005 or 2006. You see, what happened was that there was a drought in the Sea of Galilee, and the water of the Sea of Galilee receded a ways. And what happened is, as people were fishermen and people who work at Sea of Galilee, they were noticing that there were strange pieces of wood in the mud. And so they began to dig and notice that this boat was there. And it was a miracle to get this boat intact off out of the mud and brought to a museum. Now, this boat has been dated to the time of Jesus. So a lot of people want, and I think there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, but a lot of people want this boat to be the one that Peter owned. And I see no reason why we can't have that. Why not, right? Well, here's the picture of that same boat. Gives you an idea of its length. It's outlined by the frame there. These are the surviving pieces of wood that make the boat. And we were told that it is currently disintegrating. So this boat that the pieces will disintegrate. This will not be here forever. This is going to probably be ultimately destroyed. You can see by the way that they've pinned it up. They have to find a way to keep this wood together, and they have to maintain it constantly. But they say that it's going to come to a point where the boat will not stay intact anymore. So that was the great find that just happened recently, again, of the oldest sailing vessel of the Sea of Galilee. Now, if I didn't tell you before, the Sea of Galilee is the lowest freshwater source in the world. I don't know if you know that. It's the lowest point for freshwater. It's not the lowest point on the earth. It's the lowest point where freshwater is. The Sea of Galilee is gorgeous. I do want to show you something here. This is a video at dawn that I took of the Sea of Galilee. And this is going from Tiberias going north. So I'm looking south, and I'm going north. And then you will see lots of lights. That's Tiberias. You'll see smaller lights. That's Magdala and a few other areas. And I'm heading north, or bringing the camera north. Now, for those who just saw the video, I'll do it again. This is taken at about probably right before the sun, or right when the sun came up. So very, very early in the morning. And the only thing that I wish you would experience with this video is the birds and the wildlife. They're so beautiful. The birds have such beautiful songs there. It's teeming with life, and it's so beautiful to hear the songs of the birds and just all the different things that are happening in nature. It's so peaceful there. And then here is my shot before dawn of the Sea of Galilee. Probably one of my favorite shots of the entire trip. This was taken right before sunrise. And of course, you're wondering, why am I up so early? Well, as you know, we were 10 hours ahead. So for me, waking up at 3:30 or 4, even though I was going to bed at 11, was what I was doing. I was doing that almost every day for 2 weeks, it seemed like. So I was up really, really early. So anyway, this is the Sea of Galilee. Do you notice how peaceful and beautiful it is? Amazing. I wanted to get a shot of the lights of Tiberias and the lights of the more populated areas where we were. It was very remote. And that was a beautiful advantage for us because we got to really experience nature in a beautiful way there. And the inn that we were in, the Ramat Inn, was where we stayed. Very nice place, by the way. So, and this was from our suite. This is what we could see. So that ends part 2 of our Israel trip, of us going through, and that pretty much ended our second day right there. From this point on, next week we will do some shots of the north, where I share with you some things of the Syrian-Lebanese border, Tel Dan, Nimrod's castle, Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus asked the question, "Who do you say that I am?" And then also, if we have, I may even get to Jerusalem. Oh, sorry about that. Let me get back to me so you can at least see me again. That's important. So I hope you enjoyed that shot there. So from there, what'll happen is next week we'll end and we'll talk about maybe even getting to Jerusalem. You're not going to want to miss those shots. I love Jerusalem, but I loved Galilee. It is such a beautiful place there. And I think everyone who went would vouch and agree with me on that. Okay, enough said. I hope that was a blessing to you as well. Part 3 next week, and they'll probably have to do a part 4. So with all that said, if you have prayer requests, if you have any praise reports, let us know. Also, our radio program, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday. I've said enough about Israel on those programs. Next week, we catch up, well, not catch up, we get involved in some news and information and a lot of stuff going on in the world, as well as biblical insights. So we get right on top of that next week, and you're not going to want to miss next week's show. It's going to be seatbelt mandatory, I think. Also, too, our Sunday services, we hope that you will be a part of it as well. And we're praying for all of you who will be part of us. So thank you. And we will plan to see you next week. Again, contact us, prayer requests, praise reports, or for anything at all. Okay. God bless you guys. We'll see you all next week. And God bless till then.